Okay, hi everybody, and welcome to this year's Cybersecurity Predictions webinar with Lookout. We are very excited to have you join us. We're going to be taking a look into the 2025 security landscape today. My name is Hank Schless. I'm Director of Product Marketing here at Lookout, and I'm joined by a fantastic group here, fantastic couple other guys here at Lookout. So we have Sundram, our CTO, and DR, who is our VP of Product for the mobile endpoint security and threat intelligence solution. So guys, thank you for joining.
Happy to be here.
All right, so let's dive right into it, guys. So I think that looking back at last year, it was another year of the most eventful year in cybersecurity. Seems like we kind of say that every single year, but I think it's all for good reason. Anybody in the industry knows that more and more happens every year. And as I was sort of thinking about this conversation and what to highlight, there were sort of four bullets that I came up with for 2024 that really do sort of give legs or give standing to that sentiment that's the busiest year we've ever had in the industry because we had the largest data leak ever, which was about 26 billion records. US telco companies, this is something that was not just a one-time thing, but they've been dealing with attacks by Chinese threat actors, as have the US presidential campaigns as they were doing at the end of last year. And then across the pond, the NHS, the National Health Services, and then also the Ministry of Defense in the UK fell victim to major cyber attacks. We had big platforms dealing with their own issues as well. The CDK ransomware attack, which took down basically every car dealership in the US. And then we had hundreds of Snowflake customers get their data stolen, and the threat actor behind that attack attempted to extort a ton of those victims. To cap it all off, near and dear to our heart here is that there was actually the highest number of phishing and malicious web attacks targeting mobile users on record in 2024. So let's deal with. Within all of that, I think it's safe to say that as we've sort of observed these attacks, as the industry has gotten more familiar with sort of these modern tactics and all that, we're seeing threat actors move a lot more quickly across networks, devices, platforms, apps, whatever it may be, to really be able to execute these attacks more efficiently, more effectively. And that's what we're referring to as the modern kill chain, sort of this idea that the traditional cybersecurity kill chain that we all know and love is really evolving with the way that we all do business, right? And so when we talk about that, it's really these attacks where the threat actors are targeting individuals in order to compromise their identities, login credentials and all that. Typically doing that via mobile, which we'll get into a little bit. And then using that to quietly access their employer's infrastructure and steal data, which we'll also jump into a little bit as well. So for the purpose of this conversation and to be able to give myself a second to breathe here because I'm going on for a couple minutes, we're going to focus on four key themes. So we're going to focus on emerging threats in 2025, where AI plays a role in all of this, how nation state actors are evolving and kind of what their play is and everything. And then we'll top it off with what compliance and regulatory frameworks are going to do and kind of how they're going to evolve and play a big role in this world. So sound good to everyone?
Yep, sounds great.
Great.
Sounds good.
All right, cool. So let's kick it off here with one that everyone is dealing with. I think it's something that everybody knows about pretty intimately because we all see these attacks all the time, which is mobile phishing, right? We all get these messages, especially around the holidays or whatever it may be. Oh, your package hasn't been delivered. Oh, your bank account's been, accessed from an unknown location or a new location. Please confirm. We've all seen these types of attacks. And DR, I'm going to go to you first because as we've seen these attacks, continue to evolve, how are you seeing them change, especially as it relates to that modern kill chain that I just referenced? And then what's really, how is that, why is that, I guess, critical to explore considering the importance that mobile devices are playing in both personal and work life?
Yeah, no, so absolutely. We're seeing, you said it earlier, largest number of phishing attacks targeting mobile devices in 2024 of any year on record from the Lookout Mobile Threat reports. And yeah, we're certainly seeing that trend of an increase of targeting mobile devices, and it's not because there's this juicy data that you want to get off of these mobile devices. It's really because you want to compromise the identity of the individual who possesses that device, and you want to be able to impersonate them so that you can log in and access all of the data that they legitimately have access to, in part of, in their line of business, right? And so we're seeing an increase in, a couple of things. One is the omni-channel nature of these kinds of attacks, where it used to be, you send someone an email, and you hope that they click on a link in that email, and then you try to harvest credentials from them. But these days, it's a combination of SMS, email, push notifications, phone calls, all of these things, this omni-channel nature of these attacks, where you sort of like bombard someone all at once, creating a story and bringing them into an illusion. And it's usually, all geared together to basically launch a social engineering attack against an individual, right? So you want to convince them that there is something going on, whether this is, a CEO impersonation text message, which we've all probably seen these kinds of attacks launched against ourselves personally or against others at our organizations that we work for, where you urgently need something from a senior executive within your organization, to a sort of standard kind of notification that we see all the time, that we've all gotten kind of conditioned to from credit card companies, which is the sort of the notification that's like, hey, there was unusual activity. We need you to confirm some details for us. So these kinds of text messages are coming impersonating SaaS services, single sign-on services, banks, social media accounts, all of these kinds of things. Your Google account or your Apple, your iCloud account. And all of these things are ways to get in the door. They're ways for someone to establish a beachhead on your identity and then leverage that identity to be able to, to be able to basically compromise that user's account. And if you think about mobile devices, they're the one device where all of your factors of authentication all kind of live on a single device. So hopefully you're not using SMS based multi-factor authentication, but if you are, this is the device that token is being delivered to, right? If you're using app-based multi-factor authentication, then this is the device that has the app that's going to generate the token. So if there was one device to compromise, to be able to sort of fully compromise someone's identity and manage to completely take over their account, it would be their mobile device, because they're going to type in their username, they're going to type in their password, they're going to type in their MFA token or generate their MFA token or receive their MFA token on that device. And one last point I want to hit here. You mentioned, that these attacks move, faster than ever. And they absolutely do. You used to have to collect recon information on your target if you're a threat actor to launch this kind of attack, like over, a period of months. These days there's so much data out there about each and every one of us, whether that's the data we ourselves put online via social media or things like that, or the data that is inadvertently out there about all of us, thanks to all of these breaches that unfortunately each and every one of us have been impacted by. It's so easy these days to pull together a very convincing story, pull together an org chart of an organization, figure out who all the key players are, figure out who's on parental leave at the moment, or all these little details that you can use to kind of create a very convincing story, so that when you launch your social engineering attack against somebody, it's an incredibly believable thing.
Right. And one thing that I'll just add in there is, the fact is that we're seeing a lot more from the AI perspective within social engineering. I think that being able to break down, whether it's a language barrier or even just, there's so much information about not just individuals, but also the companies they work for, right? I've got to imagine, not to give anybody any ideas, but I got to imagine that you could probably ask, a Gen AI tool to write a message in the voice of a CEO for a bank or something like that, or maybe not even CEO, but maybe head of finance for a large bank asking their team to please do X, Y, or Z. Like there's probably a way to devise a prompt that would get around all that. So that definitely plays a piece in it as well. Um, and then I think, even more broadly in DR, maybe you can just in a couple sentences go over this, just sort of when it comes to the broader trend of tactics and the groups that are using them that are targeting mobile. We see a lot, but maybe just a quick bit on what we're seeing kind of between maybe the more nation state level attacks, but also those cybercrime gangs and maybe even some of the lone wolf actors as well.
Sure. Yeah. No, the AI point is a great one, because we've been conditioned with all of our security awareness training all over the years to like look for the typos in the email
Right, right.
from the phishing attack and these kinds of things. But the reality is people are leveraging generative AI tools to generate this content these days, and they're not making typos, and there's not going to be grammatical errors or those kinds of things. Even if there is a language barrier, between the threat actor and the victim, you're going to be able to smooth over those details by leveraging AI tools. And there are actually AI jailbreaks that are out there where there are certain prompts or things like that that you can leverage to basically try to circumvent the rules that have been put in place to try to prevent. You can't just ask ChatGPT to write you a phishing email. You have to be a lot more clever about it. But there are AI jailbreaks that are out there to leverage the most popular tools that are out there in the world to be able to get them to do your bidding. And then there's also like alternative, obviously people roll their own LLMs using open source technology and things like that, where they have full control and they can disable a lot of the controls that are in place. And there's even things like Fraud GPT and stuff like that, like actual tools out there that are designed to basically have all of these rules disabled so that you can leverage them to very easily create and launch the kind of attack that you want to that you're looking to perform here. And then you asked about sort of how does this differ across nation states, cyber criminal groups, lone wolf threat actors, those kinds of things. I'll say they're all leveraging social engineering, and they're all leveraging the modern kill chain as part of the process. And then depending on their level of sophistication, it may be that they're entirely using social engineering to compromise an organization. That tends to be more true with like your lone wolf threat actors or your less sophisticated cyber criminal groups. Where others, it may be a foot in the door. You want to compromise one account. Once you're inside, now you want to go and perform more traditional reconnaissance, find vulnerable web servers, exploit vulnerabilities, those kinds of things, where the lone wolf threat actors and the less sophisticated cyber criminal gangs tend to be a social engineering loop, repeat until you get to what it is that you want. So you use the compromised accounts to go try to compromise additional accounts that may have access to other information or may be networking with more senior individuals that then you go and use that account to social engineer them. So I'll say the tactics are the entry tactics are largely the same these days, but then it's what you do as part of step two that sort of differs whether you're a sophisticated nation state or a lone wolf actor out there.
Yeah, so thanks, DR, for all of that. I think it's really good context to have, and I think it's really important to be able to understand the modern kill chain, both in the context of sort of what we do on a day-to-day basis, whether that's from personal life, more importantly, obviously from the enterprise standpoint, in our work lives. That line is so often blurred in the mobile standpoint, but also we're seeing it blurred more in the context of this modern kill chain. And so understanding what we're seeing in that kind of everyday state, but also the more advanced stuff that our own research or threat intelligence teams are seeing here at Lookout is really important to help people understand the full spectrum of risk here. And you also mentioned we kind of just went through where AI is being used for those more malicious reasons, right? And I think on the flip side, you have people who are observing the real, I mean, surge might be even an understatement in what people are claiming to have as AI powered defenses. And I'm not saying that negatively, but as is the case whenever there's sort of a new like the new thing that everyone wants to try to figure out and be the best at is what drives innovation in our industry. But I think that in the next year or two, we're going to see kind of who wins out, what approaches really work when it comes to truly using AI in the way that it's grown the last year or two. That really could lead to that world where we have smarter detections, faster responses and all that. And Sundram, I want to get your 2 cents on this, because, I think your perspective on how more broadly organizations could really evolve their data security strategy in 2025. But what do you think? So kind of how do you think that changes, and where do you think AI fits into that growth this year and even beyond?
Definitely. I mean, CAI has been in use, at least in the security industry, in the cyber products for almost a decade now. Yeah.
Right.
But what is different in the last few years is there are two categories or two classes of AI. There is the predictive AI, and then there is this generative AI, right? Predictive AI has been used in security products, in cyber threat hunting, anomaly detections, those sorts of techniques for quite a long time now. But what has changed in the last 2 years is the generative AI side of the house. And as DR rightly mentioned, the threat actors do have a leg up on this, right? It's bridging the language barriers. It's being used, put to good use in generating all these fraud emails, phishing emails, smishing emails, and whatnot. Yeah. And along with that, we have fed all these data, our own personal data, into Facebooks and whatnot, all the social media. So it's so easy for the hackers to use generative AI combined with this data to launch an attack on any individual or on these enterprises. But what's changing on the security product side of this thing, as you called it, Hank, AI-powered solutions, um, is that this generative AI now is being used more and more. But as we all, in product development understand, this takes time. But in the last 2 years, we have seen some significant progress in AI being used in all the cyber hunting, explainability, basically these agentic models are also evolving significantly, right? Like, see, we have to see how this AI is helping. It's helping significant ways in improving the automation. Before, the automation was more around if this, then that type of an automation. It was more programmatic automation. But now, given the volume that the industry is facing in terms of cyber attacks and the cyber signals that we are getting, it's not going to be possible for any set of humans to tackle all these things on a daily basis. Yeah, there's going to be a burnout and all that. And this is where the AI comes in and significantly becomes a big enabler in handling these volumes of attacks that goes through any enterprise in any given day. These agentic models, there are other automations that are coming up that's going to also offload some of the decision making, not just the data processing, but the decision making. It's going to be more fluid. This is what we are seeing kind of in this AI powered products. And threat, and another important thing to understand is threat and data are two ends of the same cyber spectrum in any given enterprise. As much as the enterprises are focusing on threat and threat hunting using AI, the data and the data understanding using AI is also another evolving space where people are putting AI to good use to understand the context behind all this data sharing, context behind all this data privacies. And that's becoming a significant enabler as well to bridge the defense and the gaps.
Mhm. Yeah, definitely. I think I like that perspective with the two ends of it sort of coming together. And yeah, it's all, I mean, like you said, Sundram, like it's all sort of interesting how like I think the distinction between sort of the predictive and generative AI is critical these days. I mean, we've been using predictive AI at Lookout since day one, right? We've been around for what, 18 years now. And so it's you're absolutely spot on, but it is cool to see sort of this next level of innovation on all of this. And I'd like to pivot the conversation a tiny bit, given some of the ongoing things that we've seen in sort of recent months, I would say, and looking at sort of the ongoing activity of in this case, I'm going to be talking about Chinese nation state groups, but we can kind of zoom it out a little bit and talk a little bit more broadly. DR, we've talked a little bit about how the attacks by this group called Salt Typhoon have kind of been in the news in the last, over the last few months and seem to be kind of ongoing. So there are a couple of things that I want to touch on here. One is I think for some people, they're sort of wondering what's you know, where does the responsibility sort of lie with these types of things? Because it is a little bit of a tricky space, right? And then on top of that, kind of just more broadly, maybe what you're seeing from that nation state perspective and some of the trends we're seeing there from those actors.
Yeah. No, so it's a really interesting question, and you brought up like Snowflake earlier too, right? And I think
Right.
it's a similar kind of attack, right? Where you think about the idea of you compromise, like a group like Salt Typhoon compromises a carrier, and there are so many customers who are leveraging that carrier's infrastructure in order to do business on a daily basis, right? And it's similar with something like a Snowflake breach, right? Where it's a source of it's an entry point to get data on a bunch of different people all at once, right? And so with Salt Typhoon, we're seeing this as an entry point to collect data about presidential campaigns or all sorts of other activities, that are all vulnerable essentially because you've got someone who's got a privileged position on the network. So I would take it back a little bit to, zero trust principles, don't trust the client and don't trust the network, right? There's a reason why we use SSL and we use HTTPS for every site that we use, right? Because we don't trust the networks that we're on. We don't trust the network at the coffee shop. We don't trust the network at the hotel, or even, we may not even trust our individual internet service providers or things like that, right? So it's those zero trust principles around don't trust the client, don't trust the network definitely, apply here. I think the carriers are an especially interesting scenario too, because of the role that they play in our identities, right? Like your phone number, whether we like it or not, your phone number is sort of a key point in your identity. It is often how you would verify who you are. It is often how you would reset your password with a service if you, lost your password. Your phone number may play some role in that, or SMS-based multi-factor authentication, unfortunately, is still very prevalent in the world, even here in 2025. The carriers are really the only ones who can truly kind of protect that phone number for us, right? Now, we all need to take actions to get off of using phone numbers for anything related to our identity, and at the end of the day, a phone number really should be a username, not a password, right? But it's kind of getting used as both based on the fact that people can essentially, intercept your text messages. So I'll say I think there's a shared responsibility here. Like we need to assume that the carriers are breached now and they will be breached again in the future. And we all need to take actions to make sure that we're not that we're not overly reliant on this idea that these communication channels are secured for us. So we need to make sure that we're thinking about our organizations in such a way that assume compromise in the network.
Yeah, I think that that sort of shared responsibility model I know is something that has been around for a while, especially when it comes to, like you mentioned, DR, some of the more cloud-based services like Snowflake. But even when AWS was first rolling out and people were building their whole companies on it, I know that was a big piece of it as well, because they were basically saying we're going to provide you the foundation to build everything, but on whatever is built on top of that is your responsibility. So definitely a uniform sort of principle throughout cybersecurity. And when we were chatting before this call, you mentioned a couple of things sort of looking forward in terms of nation state groups that do things like double dip, maybe some of the trends that you've noticed there, maybe ones that you think might play a role in 2025.
Yeah, no, so absolutely. One of the really interesting things that we've seen, especially with Chinese nation state activity, but we do see this elsewhere as well. So we see groups like Roaming Mantis that will actually, hack for their government by day, and then hack for personal gain by night. So they'll actually be leveraging sometimes some of the same command and control infrastructure, sometimes exploiting the same vulnerabilities and things like that. And they'll essentially get, a sort of um, a sort of sanction from the government that it's like, okay, like obviously we're not going to turn you over to a foreign government, so feel free, do what you want. Do what you want with the skills and techniques that you've learned from this job to go enrich yourself personally. So we see this sort of like double dipping behavior, and we saw it start with sort of, things that might be more personal interests and hobbies. So like hacking video game companies to give themselves advantages or those kinds of things to their characters. But you can quickly see how this transforms into an intention to get monetary gain. We've always sort of seen this transition as well of vulnerabilities. Like even if you go back to the original Pegasus Trident set of vulnerabilities that were out there, where you see this sort of transition of like a nation state exploits a vulnerability, and then it almost becomes kind of like public domain. And then before you know it, it's like script kiddies are able to, download something off of Metasploit that leverages the exact same vulnerability. And, for example, the Trident vulnerability, there's a WebKit vulnerability in there that was used to, remotely compromise iPhones. That same vulnerability was used years later to jailbreak the Nintendo Switch. It's crazy how this once upon a time is nation state cyber mercenary capability, and now it's like you find a YouTube video that tells you what website to go to on your Nintendo Switch to go compromise it, by leveraging the exact same WebKit vulnerability.
Yeah, it's kind of like how GPS was at one time a government technology, and now it's on every single thing that we own.
Exactly.
So speaking of kind of how some of those threat actor groups behave, there's also the never-ending problem of data ransoms, right? In the past, it was more about locking everything up with malware, right? Demanding ransom for that. Nowadays, it's more about just getting the right data. And sort of as we talk about these threat actors moving laterally, being able to sort of poke and prod at different parts of cloud infrastructure under the guise of being a legitimate employee, having used their credentials to log in from a place that was, the employees located in Boston, but they log in suddenly from, from who knows, Moscow or whatever, to use the easy example. But and then being able to poke around, use that data, or sorry, hold that data for ransom. So Jerome, I know this is something you're passionate about. Looking ahead into this year, how do you see this forever problem? How do you see it evolving? What kind of new tactics might be leveraged? Are there ways that these folks might make their attacks even quieter and even more effective than they are today?
The key word that you said, it's going to become more effective, I would say. It's going to be more effective, more cost effective for the threat actors. On the other hand, for the enterprises, it's going to be more damaging. I mean, just to double click on this, like on the history on the ransomware. Well, by the way, ransomware is still the best tool in the threat actors toolkit when it comes to holding an enterprise for ransom or when they want to lock down the data. It's still the best tool for data exfiltration, for getting a full control over the enterprise's activities and the data. What is evolving and what is changing is what DR alluded to at the beginning of this call, which is this modern kill chain, is kind of now made it much more easier to deliver ransomware into the enterprises. Let me walk you through how this has evolved. Before, like 5, 10 years before, how ransomwares used to enter into the enterprises through either a 0-day vulnerability or through unpatched CVEs, through the breaches. The breaches used to happen when people double-click documents, unknown in any of these modalities on email or wherever it is, or when they're browsing the internet, there used to be water hole sites where people go to these sites and then get infected on their machines, right? So these zero-day vulnerabilities, it used to be traded. I mean, it is still traded. When people find these zero-day vulnerabilities, it used to be at some point like $100,000 type of thing, zero-day vulnerability for Acrobat Reader or a Microsoft Office zero-day vulnerability. And these threat actors used to buy this and then deploy the breach ransomware through that, right? Like that used to be the modality through which it entered. But now, fast forward to now, with the modern kill chain, it's so easy to enter an enterprise by breaching or by getting a few compromised credential of the key personnel in an enterprise. And this lets you have with little to no trace, they can get into the enterprise and deploy these ransomwares inside the enterprise where they want it, as you said, more effectively, more easily. What this means, yeah, this is where the defense and the depth, as we used to understand, is going to be more challenging, right? Like it's going to be challenged. It's already challenged. Because if you remember when, for example, when we had to access data 5, 10 years before, we had to connect through, let's say, a VPN or through a network, go through sequence of handshakes and authentications, and then go through secure connections, go into the behind the firewalls and the IDS, IPS, and then go and access the data. But now between mobile and cloud, it's as simple as logging in from your mobile device and you straight away have access to huge volumes of data, critical data, right? So this is where the defense in depth is now becoming defense in distributed systems, right? Like you need to think about distributed systems that are protecting it. This is where the ransomware, where the techniques and used to prevent ransomware or check for ransomwares used to be on the perimeter in enterprises, whether it's in the next generation firewalls or the proxies or IDS, IPS systems. Now it is now going beyond that. It has to go more towards pretty much all the endpoints, whether they are in the cloud or on your desktops or laptops or whatever device you use. Given that's the evolution I'm seeing, and that's what as researchers we are all seeing in the space. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, no, look, I think that's all spot on. And I think that one place where it continues to be problematic as well, highly regulated industries have always been obviously a prime target for threat actors. Financial motivation is the goal for the vast majority of these attacks. And obviously, if you're under the gun for something like a HIPAA or a GDPR or whatever it may be, you're going to be maybe possibly more prone to paying out a ransom or whatever it may be. So that data is in turn more valuable. So this question I'll ask both of you. Sundram, I'll start with you just from a broader data perspective. But what do you think, any new regulations coming up in 2025 from a compliance perspective? Anything like that people should really keep an eye on?
Definitely, it is again evolving space, compliance, because as the cyber gets more and more sophisticated with more and more new things like AI, right, like coming into this play. The compliance we are seeing, it's continuously evolving, and it also evolves and changes with the political dynamics, right? Like geopolitical dynamics. For example, right here in the US, what used to be centralized is now getting more, between federal and state, it's getting more distributed. And more states are coming up with their own privacy laws to protect the consumers, protect the consumer rights and whatnot. At the same time, the governments, they need to protect the systems, whether it's the public utility systems, water systems, electrical systems, utilities. They do have a lot of different controls in place. There are compliance standards for that as well. So between threat and data, there's quite a bit that's evolving. And then across the globe, there is, we used to be talking a lot about GDPR, but now look at EU AI Act. That's
Mhm.
kind of coming up. And I'm very sure, and very soon, I mean, US is already kind of writing up something on this. More and more states will also be coming. So this is going to put more onus on both the providers and the practitioners
Mhm.
and the users along the way. So compliance is a very much required, um, and we are seeing a lot of compliance standards coming up in this space.
Yeah, definitely. DR, what about from your perspective on the mobile side?
Yeah, so on mobile, definitely seeing uptick, right? So there was the Office of Management Budget put out a mandate, requiring EDR essentially for all mobile devices. They spell out tablets and phones and things like that when they're talking about the requirement for every agency in the government to protect devices, and they say that EDR is a technology that's necessary for mobile devices as well. We've seen CISA put out bulletins, especially related to the recent Salt Typhoon attacks, actually encouraging, the use of secure communications. So for example, to use end-to-end encrypted messaging applications instead of using SMS or other mechanisms, because essentially you need to assume that the carriers may be breached, and that as a result that you should not be sending sensitive data over those channels. So certainly a lot of trends pointing towards more restrictive regulations when it comes to mobile devices as well.
Definitely. Definitely. All right. Thank you. Thank you both for that. And we're actually starting to come up on time here. So one last quick one for each of you, just an opportunity to sort of offer up your 2 cents and what to look for in the upcoming year, something you feel maybe particularly passionate about or particularly interested in. DR, I'll start with you and then we can go to Sundram after.
Okay. Yeah, I think the big thing that I'm seeing is these omni-channel attacks, right? This idea that you can sort of completely overwhelm someone into a social engineering attack, and thanks to AI and thanks to just a proliferation of data that's out there about each and every one of us, it's very easy to kind of bombard someone with SMS, voice, and other attacks kind of all at once. And we've seen victims who they'll be receiving the smishing links, they'll be ignoring them, they might get a push notification, they're ignoring them, and then they answer the phone call and they say, hey, we've been seeing all this suspicious activity on your account, and their response is, yeah, me too. Right,
Yeah.
they're already bought into, even though that in of itself, that phone call is the start of a sophisticated social engineering campaign to go compromise that user's identity. They've been sort of pretexting them with all of this other information to get them convinced that something is going wrong. And if Okta or my IT department or Google or Apple is calling me all of a sudden, maybe it's for a good reason. Related to the fact that I've been seeing all this interesting stuff happen. So I think that really that omni-channel approach, and you can leverage the leverage of artificial intelligence to do like voice changers, all sorts of things like that, so that it's easy to have these kinds of conversations kind of freely, remove or change an accent, or change a tone of voice, or any of these kinds of things. It's very, very easy for attackers to get access to that kind of technology these days. And then we're seeing an increasing use of once you compromise their identity by basically getting them to buy into some sophisticated social engineering campaign, that you just leverage that identity to go compromise the organization and go, be the kind of beachhead that you need to go trigger the breach within that organization.
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate that. Sundram?
Yeah, I mean, so far as an industry and as practitioners, the conversations has been kind of on two different tracks, parallel tracks, if I may say that, between threat and data. We used to talk as if threat prevention was the primary goal. But now, what's happening in the industry is a convergence in these conversations. If threat prevention is to prevent the threats in terms of threats as a means to an end, which is the data, and these things are converging really quick, as in products are evolving into platforms that deal with both threat and the data protection, threat prevention and data protection in one single platform. Perfect examples are SASE, Secure Access Service Edge products, DSPM. So that evolution, I think the convergence has already clicked in. It's going to be a faster iterations over that with combined threat prevention and data protection platforms. That's one trend that I'm seeing in kind of accelerating in the shorter term. And another important thing is, as much as we talk about AI, people still feel there is a broader thought. Uh, is AI good to have or a must have? And more practitioners and providers and enterprise industry leaders, they feel AI is a must to have in all of their products and all of their practice to deal with these evolving cyber threats, because there is not enough talent to go around and there's not enough human power to power through this. So the AI and AI powered platforms are the way to go to tackle these issues, modern issues.
Yeah. Well, thank you both. And as I mentioned, we are up on time here, but DR Syndrome, thank you both as always for sharing your insights, especially here as we look forward into a new year. And thank you to everyone for joining us. This has been a great session. And if you want to learn more information on what Lookout has to offer, you can take a look at the resources that are attached to this session. You can always visit our website and get in touch that way. And until then, thank you all for joining. Again, DR Syndrome, thank you for offering your expertise, and hope everyone has a great rest of the day.
So, thank you for having us.
Thank you.